Hello everyone, welcome back to another Tactical Fly Fisher video. I'm your host Devin and owner of Tactical Fly Fisher. Today we're coming to you from the shop because it's nice and snowy outside, so it's a good day to film here in the shop. And I'm going to answer a question about fly box organization today. I've had this question a lot from quite a few customers and followers of the channel over the last several years, asking how I organize my nymph boxes, because one of the best things that you can do is organize your nymph boxes in a way that if you want to make a fly change, you know exactly where to grab that fly within your boxes, so you don't waste time. Now, today we're going to focus specifically on weighted nymphs. If you're fishing unweighted nymphs, you can just take the category aspect of what we're going to talk about, or same for dry flies and other things like that. But weighted nymphs and streamers, I kind of organize with the same framework. And I just went through a full fly box reorganization. So I'm going to take you into my fly boxes that I've just reorganized. You'll get a look at them and how I've organized them. But first, let's just talk broadly about a couple aspects of organization that I think about when it comes to nymph boxes. Now, the first one is I have a broad system of pattern categories that I've divided my boxes up into, or categories that I think of that I've assigned any single pattern that I use into a broad category. Now, for my own boxes, my categories include paragons, pheasant tails and their variations, hare's ears and their variations, waltz worms and sow-bugs and scuds in another category, tag nymphs like blowtorches in another category, and then I have larger flies that go into other categories like stone flies, and then my junk fly categories like eggs, mops, and worms. So in all, that's 9 categories. And I have separate boxes for my junk flies and my stone flies that I'm not going to talk a whole lot about today. I want to focus on the boxes I just reorganized to give you a peek into them. And so all those other categories of the smaller nymphs that I use, those are the ones we're going to focus on. Now, once you have your own system of categories, and that system can be whatever makes sense to you, that's just what I've come up with based on the fly selection that I've had. And that is, that fly selection has changed over the years, so some of those categories have morphed as well, but that's where I'm at currently. After you have those categories, the other aspect that I always think about with regard to nymph organization is weight. Assuming that you've come to my channel because you do some Euro nymphing, or at least are curious about it, we are using our flies as our split shot. There are points of weight when we're Euro nymphing, and so it's important to know how much of a change you're making when you go from one fly to another. Joe Humphreys is often quoted as saying something to the effect of, the difference between a good nymph fisherman and a great nymph fisherman is one split shot. Well, when it comes to Euro nymphing, the difference between a good Euro nympher and a great Euro nympher could be one change in bead size, or change in half a grain or a grain in a fly pattern. So it's important to have an idea of the aspect of weight in your own nymphs so that you know when you make a change if you're actually changing the weight of your fly or not. I've done several other videos to help you know when you're deep enough when you're Euro nymphing, and then how to also go about changing that depth with different ways, and you can find those in the video description below. But once you know whether you need to change or not, you need one of those aspects that you can change is the weight of your fly. So having an understanding of that weight is really critical. So now that I've talked a little bit about that, let me take you back into my boxes, and I'll tell you about specifically how I did the reorganization, and give you an idea of what my boxes look like now. Okay, so let's dive into my actual boxes now. And what I have done, as I talked about, I have a digital scale here, and this is going to read out to tenths of a grain. So for instance, I'm just grabbing a fly out of here from my 2.5 to 3 grain weight range, and when I put it on the scale, it's right at 3.0 grains. So that fits in that 2.5 to 3 grain weight range. And then if you get your own scale, you can kind of decide on the weight ranges that make the most sense after you've weighed a subset of your flies in the box. I went through and did that myself, and I had some ideas of gaps that I have still in my weight ranges that are important to fill. The other thing that could be interesting, if you have one of these, you could take a split shot. If you're coming from other methods of nymphing, you can take a split shot and weigh it on the scale, and then maybe drop a fly on and see which flies are close to that split shot in weight, so that you can kind of begin to equate similar weight ranges with what you might have a frame of reference from your past nymphing with just split shot, or maybe if you're still going back and forth. So for instance, that fly was 4.6 grains. That's why it was in this 4.5 to 5 grain category. So anyway, let's jump into my boxes. And one thing you're going to see right off the bat is that I have a bunch of gaps in my boxes now. So as I talked about earlier, I went in and I culled out a bunch of patterns that I hadn't used in the last, basically I gave myself an imaginary time scale. If I haven't used this fly in the last 1.5 to 2 years, I'm probably not going to use it. So I pulled out a whole bunch of those flies. And then as I got to weighing everything, I saw what my weight ranges were in my flies, and then I started assigning rows to those weight ranges based on how many flies I had within those weight ranges. So you can see in here, I don't have a whole lot of bomber flies, for instance. And basically, if you look at these two boxes, this is a heavy box, and this is a light box. And then within my heavy box, I have one row that's dedicated to these tungsten jigbacks in the 4 mils that are a 16 grain fly. So that's a big bomber fly. And you can see I have some gap there. I left that because I anticipate probably filling that in the future. Same with this. This row is all 11.5 grains and up, but not as heavy as 16. So I have some weight there that I can fill. And then here's a 10 to 11 grain row, another 10 to 11 grain row, and then basically whenever the weight changed, out in the margin here I have a label maker, and in that row I have a 9 to 10 grains, same with this one, and then an 8 to 9, etc. And then up here 7 to 8. So some of the ranges I did just a grain apart. So in this whole section here I have 6 to 7 grains, this whole section 5 to 6. And what has been great about this is that now by just assigning rows to these, I've seen within my boxes where I have weight gaps that I don't have a lot of patterns within them. Some of my favorite confidence patterns, I have entire weight ranges and grains where I just don't have any of my favorite flies in there. So now I have spaces where I can go back and tie and add to those. I also saw where I have a lot of flies. So this is after I culled out a ton of flies from the 3.2 to 4.4 grain category. But you can see I have a whole page here and a whole half a page there. But then as I get into the 4.5 to the 5 grain category, you can see I didn't have very many of those flies. So now I left some rows there that I can fill in with some of my favorite patterns, so I can get more fine increments in my weight changes. Same thing as we move into the light nymph box. So to explain this a little bit more, I have my weight category, so you can't really see it too well, but the line under there is 2 to 2.4 grains. That goes all the way over to the top of this page, as you can see from the sticker in the margin there. And then within that category, I went fastest sinking flies at the top to slowest sinking flies at the bottom. So I have Perdigons up here at the top, all the way down to there. And then actually I have some soft hackle flies in here that go against that that idea. But then from there I have basically hare's ear style flies, pheasant tails right here, sow bugs, waltzworm scuds, that type of stuff right there, and then my tag nymphs right there. So going back to the two ideas I've talked about, I have my weights, the specific weights down to 1/10 of a grain, and then I have those categories of flies, the Perdigons, the hare's ears, the pheasant tails, the waltz worm, sow bug, scuds, and then the tag nibs. And that is how I've gone about organizing my flies within those weight ranges. And then I've now found that within the 2.5 to 3 grain category, you can see I hardly have very many flies. So that's a new weight grain category I'm gonna have to work a lot on. And then on this page, same thing. I don't have very many flies in the 1.6 to 1.9 grain category. So that's a area over the winter I'll focus on. I have a fair number of 1 to 1.5 grain flies. Those are all just 2 millimeter bead flies, but there's some confidence patterns that I need to add extras to in that range as well. And then I just have some worms that I had for a worm shootout that I'm gonna do here locally over the winter to compare some different patterns. And I have some, this is actually going to be probably go away and they'll go in a different box. And I'll probably shuffle my flies around again based on extras that I tie or need from both boxes over the winter and into next year. But I also have some rows of unweighted flies down here or flies with just a few wraps of lead wire, and I use those specifically for sight fishing in shallows to fish I can see. But I also don't have very many of those, so that's one of my goals over the winter. So that gives you a little peek into my boxes and some ideas maybe for your own. Maybe you only care about breaking it into the type of fly, the category, and then going by bead sizes like I mentioned originally. And maybe you'll find that you want to go ahead and get yourself a scale and start weighing your flies out and understanding the more specifics of the weight ranges that you have in your boxes. I know for me, it takes a little more work to do that, obviously, but it's a good thought exercise to show you what you have in your fly selection and what the increments are from one fly to another, so that the next time you're making a fly change, you know whether you've actually made a change in weight or not, and how big that change has been. Thanks for watching this tactical fly fisher video. I hope you enjoyed the look inside my nymph boxes and that the reorganization that I just did gives you some ideas of how you can organize or reorganize your own nymph boxes. If you liked the video, please give it a thumbs up. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, and then hit that little bell so that you get a notification the next time we post a video. Also, come on over to tacticalflyfisher.com. We've got lots of fly boxes for your own box reorganization and any other fly tying or fly fishing gear that you might need to get you out on the water enjoying some fishiness. So we hope you stay safe and warm this winter and have a happy winter of fishing. Happy holidays as well. Thanks for watching.